Very good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. It's been a great pleasure for me to be in front of this august audience. The previous session was very intellectual deliberation, so I would like to keep this session little more lighter. So the most important topic for today is managing client expectations. Today, if you see the penetration of clients or investors across 19,000 pin codes, like we have mutual fund investors. And today we have close to about 1,32,000 distributors and close to about 4 crore investors. So on an average, a distributor manages close to about 240 to 250 odd investors, which means it's a very competitive landscape. So how investors, or how distributors have to be up the curve in terms of managing distributor and investor expectations is very critical. The main source or the important aspect as a distributor to manage client expectations is doing a digital transformation. Digital is the most important aspect today. Today, there are umpteen number of applications, mobile apps which are there in the industry. How much of it is being used? So this is just a statistics. Lot has been talked about retail, so I will just primarily focus on how ultra HNI individuals or M&I individuals' client expectations has to be managed. So today, the number of ultra HNI individuals are increasing at a significantly rapid pace. India stands 5th in the number of ultra HNI individuals. And there has been a 110% growth on the wealth per capita. And 50% of the MFDs are coming from B30 cities. So that means like it's no longer the top cities which have been nurturing the mutual fund distributors, but 50% is coming from the B30 cities. And more importantly, as I told you, there are about close to about 1.32 lakh MF distributors in the country. And there has been a significant growth in the number of demat accounts. The value of equity holdings has doubled in the last 4 years. What we did over the last 40 years has been done in the last 4 years. That's the kind of growth the individuals have contributed to the equity market. And the working age population, the number of people who are having more than $10,000 as per capita income has increased, and it's significantly increasing, and it's likely to touch 110 million, 100 million by 2027. So all these augurs to a very important factor that distributors have to keep investor interest in mind before recommending portfolios or products. So before getting on there, let's try and understand what is the perception of a mutual fund distributor or any financial advisor. People perceive that like financial advisors make easy money. This is what the society thinks. This is what our own kids think, like what we do. This is what the relatives think. And this is what the financial advisors think. So we feel that we are cloud nine. But what is the actual reality? The reality is, it is not simple what others have been thinking. It is hard work, determination, perseverance, knowledge which goes in terms of advising client and client portfolios. So as a financial advisor, all these factors have to be communicated to the investors to know that like the financial advisor plays an important role in the investment decision making. Now, today with the advent of direct plans which came into the industry some few years back, the major apprehension in the mind of investors is, am I better off investing in a direct plan? Or the fees charged by the distributors, is it commensurate with the kind of advice what I'm getting? So how do you counter this? There are few instances which I have quoted. Like equity markets, every year there is a 20% correction, temporary correction which happens. Would the investors be able to predict those kind of corrections? And more importantly, equity market returns are not linear. So had it been linear, everybody would have been rich. So that way, there is a clear need for emphasizing this to the investor community. So financial advisors have to take cognizance of this in terms of communicating this to the investors. So now, what role does financial advisors play? So everybody thinks investing in direct plan is easy. So when with the help of a financial advisor you do, this is what you get. But when the investor tries to do directly on his own, what happens? So this is the outcome. So now, so this might look like trivial, but I'll just substantiate with various facts. So direct investing. So investor goes to the market, just find the best performing mutual funds. So this is what you get to see. See, the main problem with mutual funds, so I'll just draw two analogy, like in terms of mutual fund investments with an alternate investment fund. See, the performance difference between the first quartile and the last quartile, there is very, very narrow gap when you're investing in a mutual funds. Whereas if you're investing in an alternate investment fund or a private equity fund, the performance difference between the first quartile and the last quartile is significantly different. So when you're choosing a mutual fund, even if you go with the first quartile, if there are 30 funds, you will not be able to differentiate. So the most problem which most investors face is the overconfidence bias. They think that what they are taking based on the performance of the mutual funds is what the mistake they are making. So it may look like a convex graph. In my mind, it's a linear graph, or it's even higher than a linear, because the more the overconfidence the investor has, the probability of making mistakes is very, very higher. So definitely the financial advisor and his advice is very critical in terms of choosing the fund. So this is an interesting analysis. As I told you before, if you bucket the performance over a 3-year and a 5-year period, when I talk about performance, I'm talking about the performance persistence, the persistence of performance. For a 3-year period, only 27%, which is roughly around one-fourth of the funds, continue to stay in the top quartile over a 3-year period. And over a 5-year period, it's roughly 1/5 of the funds continue to stay in the top quartile. So as an investor, will you be able to spot those 1/5 of the funds, which means the probability of making error is 80%. So that's where the role of financial advisor comes into play, in terms of identifying the right mutual funds and right asset class, not only based on performance, but based on various other parameters. This is another interesting part. In 2018-2020, if somebody has invested in the best performing fund, currently that fund is 190th rank. Similarly, the fund which was ranked 160 is ranked number 1. So it is not so easy to spot the best performing or worst performing fund at any point in time. So there are various parameters which needs to be looked into before advising to the clients. So advisor is of paramount importance, and the investor should be made to realize that advisors adds value in terms of their investment decisions. So this is, again, last panel they spoke about active investing. Definitely active portfolios are very important as a part of client's portfolio. But if you see the trend, there is a significant increase in the number of schemes which have been launched. It is not only the ETFs, the top one talks about the index funds, and the below one talks about the ETFs. Just imagine the number of folios or number of investors which have been added in the passives. So you as a financial advisor, if you are not advising passives to your investors and just focusing only on active funds, so that means we are myopic in our thought process. How are these investments made? Is it made through distributors? How many of us have recommended passives? Even though the commissions could be lower, but investor interest is on passives. So passives are no longer a passive story. Passives are becoming an active part of the portfolio. So investors have started looking at passives. If you don't recommend passives, then it's going to be some way or other they're going to invest in passives in some way or the other. So now, setting client expectations. So primarily, when you set client expectations, predominantly what most of us or most of the advisors try to do is, like, we try to pitch in for a product. So never do a product-centric approach. It has to be a portfolio-oriented approach. When you show the performance report to the client also, it should not be a product-centric performance. It has to be a portfolio-oriented. It has to be risk, return, everything has to be on a portfolio-oriented basis. And how many of us do IPS? When I say IPS, it's investment policy statement. So when you onboard a customer, you should look at the risk objectives, return objectives, his tax objectives, his liquidity, and unique circumstances. All these things have to be analyzed. So it may not be required for a retail investor, but we're recommending this to a M&A or a HNI investor. So definitely these parameters has to be taken into consideration before providing investment advice. So again, risk profiling. This also has to be done. This is very, very important because when you do an asset allocation on investor's portfolio, it is primarily based on the risk profile and the IPS. So next comes the diversification and asset allocation. So what most of us think is diversification is investing in XYZ fund and moving into different fund. If you're investing large cap, small cap, that is a diversification. That is not diversification. Diversification has to be across asset class, has to be across sectors, across market cap, across geography, and across investment styles. So it need not be from one fund to other. Okay? Asset allocation. This is the most ignored topic or most misunderstood topic. Asset allocation is the key. Product selection is an outcome of asset allocation. So first of all, you need to set what your strategic asset allocations are and also have a tactical asset allocation. When I say strategic asset allocation and tactical allocation, 20% of your portfolio can be a tactical portfolio where you can, whenever there are market corrections, you can just drift away from your strategic asset allocation. And the last one is the core and satellite. So as passives are increasing significantly, maybe some portion of the portfolio can be a core portfolio which is into active funds and some can be into passives. Portfolio rebalancing, this is a very, very critical aspect of investment portfolio management. Today, since your objectives are set and asset allocation is been defined, so periodic portfolio rebalancing is very important and it has to be done on a periodic basis, sitting with the client and understanding their expectations, whether their risk profiles have changed or not. See, as I mentioned earlier, the number of DMATs accounts have increased. So it is almost like from 40 million about 4 years back has now become close to about 120 million. So a lot of people are investing in direct equities. The most interesting and important question which comes to from the investor's mind is, should I invest in direct equities? I've got 20% return in 10 days. So always there is a debate between value versus momentum. So it's clearly value versus momentum. You should try and explain what value investing is. You should try and clearly explain to your investors how value strategies pay over a long period of time and how momentum investment can be destructive and disruptive. And these are few investor communication which you need to be building in as a part of your investment recommendation. So I'll not spend more time on this. This is more self-explanatory. Always under-promise and over-deliver. When you are communicating to the client, you should effectively communicate your risk and return objectives and risk and return trade-off. If the risk and return objectives and trade-offs have not been communicated to the customers or investors, so that's going to be detrimental on his portfolio. So never ever overpromise or just give unpleasant truth to your unpleasant lies to your investors. Always be genuine and just try explaining. Even there could be a partial deterioration in terms of portfolio. Always sit with the customer, sit with the investor, explain what are the reasons for the fall. So that never we should be myopic, take a long-term view. Driving change through technology and digital transformation is very, very critical. Thank you.